My dad cut me out of his life for 10 years. When he got sick, I took care of him. He died without ever saying sorry. Hi everyone, this won't be satisfying. There's no twist, no justice, no dramatic redemption arc, just me, my father, and 10 years of silence that ended too late. My name's Eric. I'm 32. I work in home renovation, drywall, tile, the occasional kitchen. Nothing fancy, but honest work. I live alone. Quiet guy, good with my hands, not so good with feelings. And maybe that's because of him. My dad. His name was Ray. Everyone called him Big Ray, like he was some old school trucker from a movie. Square jaw, tough voice, knew everything about cars, didn't believe in sunscreen or apologies. And growing up, I wanted nothing more than for him to see me. Not just look at me, but really see me. He didn't, not unless I was doing something wrong. My mom left when I was 9. She never explained it to me, just packed up her things one morning and kissed me on the forehead while I pretended to still be asleep. I heard the front door close. I didn't move. I waited for him to come into my room to explain. He never did. That day, he made me grilled cheese and turned the volume up on the TV. We never talked about her again. I learned early that feelings weren't welcome in our house. If I cried, he told me to man up. If I was quiet, he'd snap, "Speak up or go to your room." There was no in-between, no softness, no space. He taught me how to mow a lawn, change spark plugs, patch a wall, and that's about it. The man had a toolbox for every kind of fix, but none for human connection. By the time I turned 16, we barely spoke unless it was about chores or grades or how I was disrespecting his roof. I got good at leaving the house before he woke up and coming home after he was asleep. Sometimes I'd leave notes instead of asking for things in person. He never replied to them, but the answer was always there. Less money in my wallet, gas in the car, dinner left on the stove. That was his way of parenting, through absence, through actions with no words attached. Then came the fight. I was 21, still living at home, working part-time while figuring out my path. He'd been on my case for weeks about doing something real with my life. That night, I told him I didn't want to be like him. He told me I'd never be man enough to be. It escalated. I said something I can't take back. He said something I'll never forget. "You're not my son anymore." I grabbed my duffel, walked out, and didn't look back. And for the next 10 years, we didn't speak. No calls, no texts, not on birthdays, not even when I heard from a cousin that he'd gotten divorced again. He didn't come to my graduation when I finally finished trade school. I didn't invite him. I built my life without him. I thought I could outrun the damage. I was wrong. The call came on a Tuesday. It was my aunt, my dad's older sister, Linda. We hadn't spoken in years, not because of any drama between us, but because when you cut off a parent, the whole branch of the family tree tends to rot with it. Her voice was tight, like she didn't want to be the one telling me, "Eric, it's your dad, stage 4. Lung cancer, spreading. They caught it late, or maybe he ignored it until it got too loud to avoid. Either way, she said the same words I'd been dreading and expecting all at once. There's not much time. I didn't say anything for a full 10 seconds. Then I asked, "Why are you calling me?" She exhaled slowly. "Because he doesn't have anyone else left, and you're still his son." That word, son, it hit like ice water down my spine. The next few days were a blur. I kept working, kept showing up to job sites, hung drywall, sanded edges, nodded at bad jokes from guys I didn't know that well. But inside, my brain kept spiraling. It wasn't like I owed him anything. He made it clear a decade ago that I didn't matter to him, so why the hell was this eating me up? I talked to no one about it. Just me and the ceiling fan at 2 a.m., running over every childhood memory that hurt more than it helped. How he never came to my football games, but always asked if I played like a man. How he told me I wasn't built for college, but laughed when I said I wanted to try. How he slammed a door in my face when I said I was moving out. And didn't call once in 10 years. 10 years. That's a long time to go without hearing the voice of the man who raised you, or maybe raised is too generous a word. I held out for 5 days. Then I packed a bag and drove back. 3 hours on the road, mostly in silence except for the buzz of the tires and that one part of me that kept whispering, "What if he doesn't want to see you?" But when I pulled up to the house, same peeling paint, same cracked driveway, and knocked on the door, it wasn't anger I felt. It was emptiness. My aunt opened the door. She looked older, smaller, sadder. She didn't say much, just hugged me, long and silent, like she'd been holding her breath for years. "He's in the back room," she said. I stepped into the house I hadn't seen in a decade. It smelled the same, like dust, old flannel, and something faintly metallic, hospital-like. The hallway felt narrower. The pictures on the walls were faded. One of them was of me and him fishing, back when I still thought he was indestructible. I stood in front of the door for too long. Then I pushed it open. He looked like a skeleton with skin. Face sunken, arms thin, a tube under his nose. The kind of body that only happens when pain eats everything else first. His eyes opened when he heard the creak. He stared at me for a long time. No words, no emotion, just looked. And then he said it. Not "hi," not "you came." Just "turn off the light when you leave." That was it. I didn't leave that night. I probably should have. Most people would have. But something in me, maybe guilt, maybe some fractured version of duty, told me to stay. My aunt had been sleeping on the couch for weeks, driving across town every day just to bring him soup and clean laundry he never thanked her for. She was exhausted, the kind of tired that doesn't go away with sleep. So I said I'd stay a few nights, just to give her a break. It turned into 2 weeks. At first, we barely spoke. I made his meals. He complained they were too salty. I adjusted his pillows. He said I did it wrong. I emptied his portable toilet. He said nothing at all. Every task felt like pushing a rock uphill while someone stood behind me muttering that I was doing it wrong. But I kept doing it. Morning sponge baths, changing bed sheets, checking his meds. He never once asked about my life. Never said he was glad I came. He just stared at the TV, nodded when I handed him water, and mumbled instructions like I was an intern in his dying body's office. Sometimes I'd talk to fill the silence, tell him about work, about how I'd started my own small crew, how we'd landed a decent apartment Reno contract last fall. No reaction. I told him about a girl I dated briefly, how it didn't work out, but I still thought about her sometimes. Nothing. I told him I still remembered how to change the oil the way he taught me. He nodded once. That was the closest thing to a conversation we had. One night, he couldn't sleep. His breathing was shallow, uneven. I sat by his bed, watching the rise and fall of his chest like it was the only thing tying him to this world. He looked at me and said, "You ever gonna have kids?" It came out of nowhere. I blinked. "I don't know," I said. "You think I'd be a good dad?" He didn't answer, just looked away. And I realized he couldn't say it. Couldn't say yes or no or even I don't know. Because any answer would have required vulnerability. And even on his deathbed, that was one thing he didn't have left. A few days later, he fell into a cycle of shallow sleep and half-awake confusion. Started calling out names I didn't recognize. Sometimes yelled. Once, he called for my mom. I sat there in the doorway, listening. I thought maybe, just once, he'd say mine. Maybe I'd hear Eric. I never did. He died at 4:17 a.m. on a Thursday. I was in the kitchen reheating soup. I came back and the monitor was flat. His eyes half open, fixed on the corner of the ceiling like he was looking at something I couldn't see. I stood there for a full minute before calling my aunt. When she arrived, she cried. I didn't. After the hospice staff took his body away, the house felt impossibly still, not quiet, hollow, like even the walls were holding their breath. My aunt made tea, She didn't drink it, just held the mug between her hands like it gave her something to do. We didn't speak for a while. There was nothing to say. She eventually nodded toward the bedroom and said, "There's a few things we should sort through. You don't have to, but maybe it would help." I went alone. The room smelled like antiseptic and old man, like the scent of dying had settled into the carpet. I opened the window, let in some stale April air, and turned on the bedside lamp. I started small. Socks, slippers, books he hadn't read, medication bottles with names I couldn't pronounce, receipts for things he never used, a cordless drill, a subscription to a newspaper he hadn't read since 2015. Then I found the shoebox. It was shoved all the way to the back of the closet. Nothing fancy. A black Nike box, scuffed at the edges. Inside, a photo of me holding a trophy at a middle school track meet. A folded note from my third grade teacher saying I was quiet but thoughtful. A birthday card I made him when I was 8, all markers and crooked hearts. A wrinkled movie ticket stub for something we saw once. I don't even remember the film. And then the letter, half a page, unfolded easily like it had been read 1,000 times. It wasn't dated, just started. I don't know how to say any of this out loud. I never did. I think I messed things up with you early and I didn't know how to fix it. There was a line scratched out after that, impossible to read. Then, maybe one day I'll have the guts to... That's where it ended. No signature, no second page, just that. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time holding that paper. It didn't make me cry. It didn't make me angry. It just left me tired. Because it proved what I already knew. He felt something. He knew. But he never did the work, never sent the letter, never made the call, never showed up. He waited until he was too far gone to do anything real about it, and I was left with a photo, a broken sentence, and 10 years of space between what we were and what we could have been. Later that night, I stood outside on the porch. It was cold. The wind was sharp. But I stayed. My aunt came out and stood beside me. Neither of us looked at each other. She asked me quietly, "Do you think he was proud of you?" I didn't answer, because maybe he was. But maybe he didn't know how to be. Or maybe he was just a man raised by another man who also didn't know how to say the right things. And the chain never got broken. And now it was my turn. I went home 2 days after the funeral. There was no big emotional moment, no final words, just a bag in the trunk, silence on the drive, and a strange heaviness in my chest that didn't come from grief. At least, not the kind people talk about. I unlocked the door to my apartment, dropped my bag, and stood there for a minute. It smelled the same crooked photo on the wall, same mail I hadn't picked up, same stack of dishes I didn't do before I left. But I wasn't the same. That first night back, I didn't sleep much. Kept thinking about that damn letter. How he wrote that maybe one day he'd say something. How one day never came. And how easy it is for people to think time will eventually fix everything if you just ignore the damage long enough. But time doesn't fix anything. People do, or they don't. And then time just builds walls where bridges should have been. I went back to work the next week. The guys on site were quiet at first, respectful. Someone made a joke about how I got out of demo duty by playing the dead dad card. I laughed. It helped, weirdly. But during lunch breaks, I caught myself drifting, thinking about conversations I'd never have, weddings he'd never be at, kids I might one day raise, and the pressure I already felt to be nothing like him. It's a strange feeling, being a grown man and still trying to understand what father is supposed to mean. I used to think it was strength. Then I thought it was control. Now I think it might just be presence. And he wasn't present. Not really. Not ever. I didn't tell anyone at work the full story. Just that he was sick, that I helped, that he passed. I left out the part where he never said he was proud. Left out the part where the only thing he left me was a box of scraps and a few words he never had the courage to finish. People like simple stories. father and son reconcile. Final moment of peace. Tears, hug, forgiveness. We didn't get that. We got silence. And then death. A month after I got back, I started writing. Just a little bit at first. Notes on my phone, half thoughts, things I wish he'd said, things I wish I had. Eventually I bought a journal. Nothing fancy, just something to hold the weight. I don't write to him, I write to myself. Because somewhere along the way I realized that I've spent most of my life waiting to hear something from him that was never going to come. And in the meantime, I forgot how to say things to myself. Like, you did enough. You're not him. You showed up, and that matters. I keep the letter in my toolbox now, folded behind the tape measure, not because I want to carry him with me, but because I want to carry the reminder that silence can be just as damaging as cruelty, that withholding love is not the same as being strong, and that I don't want to be the man who waits until his lungs give out to finally speak the truth. Update. It's been 4 months since my dad passed, and I still think about him. Not every day, not even every week, but sometimes in the middle of the night, or when I'm sitting in traffic with my hand on the wheel and nothing but static on the radio, he shows up. Not in words, just in that tight feeling under the ribs. That half-formed question I'll never get to ask. That sentence I know he'll never finish. A few people have asked, not out loud, but in the way people ask when they say, "You doing okay?" and hold your eye contact just a little longer than normal. So here are the answers. Did you forgive him? Number. But I'm learning that forgiveness isn't a requirement for peace. I didn't forgive him for what he said, or what he didn't, but I let go of needing him to fix it. That's close enough for me. Do you miss him? I miss what we never had. I miss the idea of a father, not the man he was. I miss the version of me who still believed that one day he might show up differently. But the man I buried? Number, I don't miss him. Would you do it all again? Yes. Because I didn't go back for him. I went back so I could look at myself in the mirror and know I didn't become the version of him I feared. I went back because I needed to see that even when someone gives you nothing, you can still give without becoming empty. And finally, what's the lesson? That sometimes you don't get closure. Sometimes you don't get the apology. Sometimes the person who hurt you dies with the last word still stuck in their throat. But that doesn't mean you're stuck with the silence. You can still speak. You can still feel. You can still decide, today, to be something better. I don't carry his legacy, I carry the lesson. And that's enough. Thanks for listening.